The mailman doesn't deliver on a Sunday.
If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
Anthony for three. Bang! J.R. Smith! We just saw men fly. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Cleveland! This is for you!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gain. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. Been a hot minute, but we are back. We decided to take a little bit of break. We needed a break from you guys. You guys needed a break from us. There wasn't too much going on, but we're back to get into some over-unders heading into the new seasons. Obviously, we're still a few months out before the season gets started, but this is always it's always fun when we see the win-loss over-unders come out. It's an interesting way to look at teams ahead of the new season and after free agency and signing new deals. But we're going to start out east and work our way over to the west, truly going coast to coast on today's episode. But before we get into it, Chris, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Enjoying the summer. It's finally like we can go outside here in New England. For the past week, it was like just walking into a sauna. So that's nice to get that over with. But we have no Levine news, so it's good to not have to constantly listen to that. Here and there, you get a little bit of like Lonzo hope, which I'm a little sick of, but it's good. Let's talk about some over-unders. I'm excited to get. Maybe we'll actually throw some bets this year. You've not held up your end of the bets, and neither have I. So you got to do something concrete.
We got to try something there, but yeah, I mean, Lonzo, I think he was cleared for 5v5 yesterday, right? Yeah, you got to get that.
Yeah,
here we go. Maybe even
2-second clips
might
of him shooting jumpers. Yeah. I'm sure it'll work.
He's coming back. The Bulls are back, baby. All right, we're gonna start at East. We'll start at the bottom of the East and we'll work our way up. Brooklyn Nets, 19.5 projected wins this year. I mean, not too much to say. They desperately want Cooper Flag. They're clearly trying to tank. But like I said to you before we hopped on here, I am looking forward to seeing Cam Thomas just go out there and chuck the ball up with the expectation of losing.
I think what I love about the offseason is it's our opportunity to make ridiculous statements that are based in hope and not evidence-based, because we're 2 months removed from actual basketball and you can get away with it. And look at this roster. How funny would it be if they had like a spunky Brooklyn Nets kind of comeback? Like, these guys are like, hey, we're not a tanking team, we're NBA players. What if Ben Simmons is like, hey, bro, I still play basketball. I'm going to try this year. And Cam Thomas is like, hey, I'm actually like a top 10 scorer in this league. And Dennis Schroeder's like, hey, I'm a like top whatever veteran point guard. I'm going to contribute to winning. Oh, Cam Johnson, he's on this roster. Oh, Dorian Finney-Smith is still on this roster. Nick Claxton is still one of the best shot blockers in the league, one of the best rim runners in the league. Oh, Bojan, that's another comeback guy. Who knows, bro? Like, this could be a team that just sneakily pulls himself out of like the bottom three. What if they end up in like, instead of having the top odds, Blazers are definitely going to be worse than them. Wizards are definitely going to be worse than them. Pistons, I have no idea. But they still have almost too much good talent on this team to not be a little bit of afraid to pull away from the tank that they should be on 100%.
Yeah, I think their head coach and I think their ownership are going to be hoping that they get the opportunity for a few injuries and force kind of err on the side of caution with players, be able to sit them. I'm not going to get too excited with Ben Simmons because, I mean, it is Ben Simmons. I think we'll obviously be looking to move Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, but for real, like on paper, they very much have like a similar sort of roster to that rambunctious Nets team we fell in love with, 2019, that season. Like they're not miles off that competing with that roster. So for sure, if they stay as they are and they're healthy, like it wouldn't be crazy if they were around the play-in mark. That wouldn't be insane. I just think they're so desperate to get a good spot on the Cooper Flag running that I think they will work hard to make sure that they tank no matter what the players on the floor actually want to do. If that makes sense.
Let's see.
I mean, what did they win last year? I think they were around like 30 mark last year. I mean, they'll be hoping that they fall under the 19 and a half game mark. Like, but I
Yeah,
mean,
32 wins last year, down to 19 expected. That's the over-under mark, 19 and a half. I think that's fair. Losing McHale and probably the trades they will make. The new coach effect is interesting to me, though. A guy who's having his first opportunity to coach in the NBA, being sent to a team where, I mean, who are your young? It's not like a, hey, please come to this team, develop our young talent. We're going to be bad. It's like he's coming into a team that doesn't have that young talent yet and is going to try to be bad. Like that seems like a terrible position to be in. And he has actual NBA players like this dude, Jordy Fernandez, like in his first gig. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like, hey, you hired me to coach an NBA team. I'm gonna play, we're gonna play to win. So I always wonder how those conversations go behind the scenes for a guy who is gonna be a scapegoat eventually if they end up being bad for a couple of years.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's where the kind of ownership has to get creative, and like they have to make trades for guys.
Yeah,
That's kind
they're
of
gonna have to.
that's if they want to be in the Cooper Flag
Yeah.
running, they're gonna have to. That's what they're gonna have to do for sure. But yeah, definitely a bit of an awkward spot for first time head coach to come into, but obviously a great opportunity if they end up tanking, get a guy like Cooper Flag, and
Oh
what a
yeah.
starting point there. The Wizards 22 and a half. I mean, they won 15 games last year. I'm not expecting them. I'm not expecting them to win 8 more this year, to be
How
honest.
many games do you lose with Alex Sarr?
Yeah, I mean, like Alex there, like he really stank it up at the summer league. Is that a sign of things to come? Was that just a bit of growing pains? Maybe he'll develop as the season goes on. But the whole thing we're going to be watching with the Wizards this year is where they trade Brogdon, Kuzma, probably Valanciunas as well. Pretty much all their veteran guys are just constantly going to be linked to trades, and that's kind of the most that we will hear about the Washington Wizards this year. If you're betting on that one, I think you're absolutely
I'm
milling
taking the under.
the under there. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I'm not expecting them to win 8 more games than they did last year,
Yeah.
especially with a guy like Cooper Flag being available. No way.
Valanciunas will keep them. He's a pretty solid floor keeper. That just has a big there. But if they find a way to get off of Valanciunas earlier in the season, then that's Alex Sarr does not look NBA ready, which is a
No.
bummer because he was a guy, and I don't think we had the opportunity to touch on his summer league performance, but just real quick, like I think there are a lot of players in the draft that we've done over the past few years where they have the NBA body, they have the NBA, like the picture of the NBA skill, but then there's just like a couple red flags that, like, if they're there, are pretty damning to them as a prospect. And the effort, the physicality, and the rebounding questions that we had for him looked painfully obvious in summer league. In
Mhm.
summer league, like
Yeah, that's
there aren't crazy 7-footers out there that you're going up against. Like you have your Zach Edey's, your Donovan Clingan, sure, but like he just did not look willing to play like a 7-footer, and that's something that even head coaches of his in Australia had to talk about. So we'll see with him, but it's looking like a pretty bleak summer, at least for the hopes of their player development. If unless you're banking on um, Koulibaly, which he should be a fun watch, but I definitely take the under. He's not going to be adding much this season.
no, it's going to be another tough year for the Washington Wizards. And then Pistons are up at 24 and a half. They had 14 wins last year. I mean, I quietly like taking the over here.
Yeah,
I'm
the
like,
over's tough.
as especially the look the Pistons have had the last few years with the draft lottery. I mean, they got to just be thinking we could have 0 wins this year and we probably still wouldn't get the number 1 pick. And like, if we finally get a healthy year out of Cade, like I'd be excited to see a healthy year from Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren. See how their games can develop. They've got the young pieces there, and like you've always been a big fan of Cade Cunningham. You're kind of a believer that he is their guy. So I mean, I hope we get a healthy season from him, and we finally get to see it. And if that happens, I wouldn't rule them out. I wouldn't rule out them winning somewhere in the 25 to 30 game range.
Yeah, and I'll say with Cade, here's my Cade update. 'Cause I feel like every year it's like, all right, it's the same thing. Like he needs to be healthy. You need to see a complete team around him, and that's a very difficult part about having a team that's so dysfunctional is the word, but also not fully baked. Like they don't have all the pieces around them. But I think now, again, Harris, not a great signing, but I think he offers the tools of a player you need around Cade to have that floor spacing, to have a secondary creator, to have a guy that can support you from the perimeter. And then you bring in Tim Hardaway Jr., like a more proven shooter. Now you got in Malik Beasley. You just got more spacing around a guy who really needs that. Um, I think though that this is more than a prove it year. This will not just prove whether or not he's a guy for the franchise, but I think for a guy who was a number one prospect in his draft, a guy that a lot of people had comparisons to guys like Tatum and Doncic, not to the absolute level of talent, but what he could work his way towards. That vision is kind of quickly fading over the past year and a half. And injuries, head coaching change, roster, sure, those are all valid things to talk about. But if he's going to be that level of player, I think this is kind of maybe not his last chance to show it, but it's getting there. If you are going to be that guy to lead the Pistons back and you're going to be that level of talent, it's got to show up eventually. And he's got to rise above those issues because you do have talent on this team now. There are good role players. Simone Fontecchio, another guy I really like that they got in. They have some solid floor spacers, two-way players that could help them out in a big way. More than 9 wins from last year. I could see that. The Bulls are going to be bad. I think Hawks
I
will
think
continue to be bad.
that's me showing.
Like,
I think the faith they have in Cade, and like obviously
Yeah.
JB Bickerstaff coming in, great head coach.
Yes.
We saw what he did to help develop a guy like Darius Garland, and I think Cade's a guy who's got an even higher ceiling than a Darius Garland. So if he can have a similar sort of effect, I think it wouldn't be crazy to see them finally take. I'm not going to say a huge leap. I still see them being like the 13th or the 12th seed most likely in the Eastern Conference. But I don't think it would be crazy if we saw them go on a little bit of a run and not be so obviously trying to tank like we've seen over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think even more than JB, like JB, 100% having a guy who is very well known to be good in the locker room, especially with young players. They also got in Fred Vincent, and you look at how he helped Lonzo Ball develop his shot, Herb Jones develop his shot, Najee Marshall, all the things he did, and with the Pelicans. There's a reason he's known as a shot doctor. There's a reason that he's one of the best shooting coaches in the league. There's a lot of guys on this team that need to really develop their shooting. That could be like not just player altering, but franchise altering. If some of these guys on this roster like figure out a respectable shot, if Jaden Ivey gets to a not an elite level, but a good level, Asar Thompson can just hit a corner three, literally just a corner three. If you can get your rookie there to also start to look good, then that changes a lot of things because they have so many versatile, long, athletic, fast players that alongside Cade could be fun and do a lot of cool things, but it just takes a shot. So that's like I feel like we say that with so many players that they're a shot away, but truly with these players, with the amount of talent that they have, they are a shot away from going from solid NBA players to really, really good NBA players.
Yeah, even if you get like half of those guys to figure out a shot, that'd be a major plus and a major success for the Pistons. But I would say definitely be a bit more optimistic, Pistons fans. I know that's a very tough thing to actually believe and say to a Detroit Pistons fan, but I think there's reason for it. Charlotte Hornets 29.5. They won 21 last year. Health is such a big thing with this team. Like can LaMelo actually be healthy? Can he change his shoes? Can he break his deal with Puma? Is that like apparently that's a big deal? Why his ankles are invisible?
Who's posting that? Nike, Adidas?
No, that was his dad. His dad said the reason that
he's like, yeah, because he's not wearing big baller brand anymore.
Yeah, like he's the shoes. That's apparently why his ankles are causing him so much trouble. But yeah, the Hornets, they're in a tough spot because we just don't know what LaMelo's health going to be. Like if we knew he was going to play 70 games next year, you'd really have belief that this could be a fun young team, especially getting to see what Brandon Miller does in his second year. They've got some talent around. They brought back Miles Bridges. They hopefully Mark Williams is healthy this year. I mean, he's a guy that I was really high on in the
Yeah.
draft, and obviously had back issues, which are always tough. Be great if he's healthy this year. Bringing in a guy like Green, Josh Green, I think he could possibly be a starter here.
Oh yeah.
They got some solid role players like Grant Williams and a few other guys. Like, if LaMelo Ball is healthy and leading this unit, I think they could be a really a fun team this year. That it wouldn't be insane if we saw them battling for like the 10 seed or something like that. But also, I think if they're back around the mark that they were last year as well, I don't think it would be too surprising either.
Yeah, that's why I find I can't believe I'm saying this sentence out loud, but I find the Hornets and the Pistons in their situations fascinating. That does not mean I'll be watching many of their games until they prove otherwise. Um, but where they're at is not a tanking position. They have the guys that they want to build around. They have the vision for what they want their team to be like. Pistons have their Cade future. They have their Jaden Ivey future. Now they've really developed into a team that I think has their core that they just want to figure out how to make it work, as opposed to we need a guy to make it work. And same thing here. LaMelo Ball absolutely is that guy. I mean, look at his last 15 games. He averaged 26 points per game, 7.5 assists, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, shooting 45% from the floor, 37% from three. Like, he looked like, I mean, an all-star. He is an all-star level player. He's an all NBA level player. He's a guy that I think maybe he's not leading a team to a championship, but he's absolutely running an engine of, I believe, a really good team. And then Brandon Miller, from what he showed us last year, I think we changed our perspective on how good he can be. And I think he did kind of enter the, can he be a multi-time all-star type player in his future? And that's a realistic question. And I think he can get there with the right team run, with the right guidance. Josh Green mentioned I like him. Miles Bridges, what he's bringing on the floor, I think they're happy to have that depth there. And there's just too much. There's too much talent on this team for them not to continue to push, to continue to get better. And Taj Gibson's there, man. That's all the leadership they need to figure things out. They got Taj Gibson. Things are going to be on the rise for them.
He's going to be loving swinging that towel at the end of the bench for sure. Next one up, the Toronto Raptors, 30.5. This is one I'm really interested in. I will be smashing the over on this.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Walk me through that one.
I think these are like, this is a young team, but it's also not that young. I mean, Scotty Barnes, obviously he's their lead guy, and he's only going into year 4. But I expect Scotty Barnes to be like a near 20-10-5 guy again this year.
Yeah.
And sure. I expect the shot to, if not get better, definitely him to continue showing that willingness to take more threes. IQ, I expect him to have a big year. Like, he's like a young veteran. RJ Barrett, similar. Then they got Hurdle, they got different guys like that. Like, this is a really solid unit, and I think they won 25 games last year, and Scotty Barnes missed the last 22. So I mean, I think with the growth that he's going to show and the leadership that he's going to show, I think they could end up stumbling into the 9 or 10 seed in the Eastern Conference for sure.
Yeah, and another team that is not good right now that could get a lot better, and that's on the shoulders of Scotty Barnes. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It comes down to what is our identity, really? Because we all want the identity to be an offense that runs through Scotty. He's your primary engine, your primary playmaker, and you want it to work out that way. And I think Quickly can complement that if Grady Dick can actually take a leap to be a real starter. And I think he showed really nice flashes. Really solid effort on the defensive end. You really see his size out there. The shooting is going to come along. RJ Barrett's just still a question mark in terms of his fit there. He always will be.
He's the ultimate question mark.
Yeah. And you almost believe more in putting Oche out there as a more consistent floor spacer around Scotty. But if this all works, it's because Scotty took the leap from being a borderline all-star player to being bona fide, team leading guy. And the leadership thing, that's what matters. I mean, a lot of this comes out. He's a young guy. It's a lot to put on his shoulders. I think that's why they're ready to make this move. They're ready to, get off of OG. They're ready to get off of Siakam because they're like, all right, we have Scotty. We weren't going to make a trade to get any stars in when we had him. And you just got to push forward with that. And I think this is that's a tough bet to make though. I believe in Scotty's talent, but I'm not sure in terms of has he gotten there yet? Is he a mature NBA star level player right now? It could be a lot to expect from him there.
I'm gonna put that faith in him and say yes, he is. Let's go, Scotty. Let's show the world what you're about. But yeah, well, don't get me wrong. Like I'm saying that I'm talking about them being the 9-10 seed. I'm not going anything. I'm not going overly crazy
fair,
with that. But
fair.
I think to win, I think they can win 31 games. Like I think they can win 31 games. Like it's 30 and a half. I'd be confident putting a bet on them to take the over.
So is anyone even tanking? We just went through the Pistons. We went through the Hornets. Went through the Raptors. Wizards, sure. Yeah, they're tanking.
Wizards are tanking. I think the Nets are tanking. I know we talked about them having the roster.
You don't know.
But I think they'll make sure that they are tanking. I think they will. They'll definitely make sure of that. And then we got your Bulls.
They are also not going to be intentionally tanking. They might be too good to tank.
30 and a half. They had 39 wins last year. I mean, it's all just a bit chaotic in Chicago. They're going younger. Caruso's gone, which ultimately means your defense is gone.
Yes.
And that was also that was a big part of why you had 39 wins last year. I mean, what are the Bulls? What is the Bulls' game plan? What are they really trying to do this year? What's going to happen with Levine? What's going to happen with Vucevic? I mean, the young guy the guy they drafted looks good, looks fun. I'd like to see him get minutes this year.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, teams get desperate and they're able to move Levine during the year. And obviously, then I think once Levine goes, then Vucevic will probably quickly follow. You kind of just want to see them make the transition, and it's just taking a bit longer than it needed to. But they've obviously made some terrible deals so far this year. I mean, that the DeRozan sign and trade was a bit of a disaster. It seemed like they were just really happy to get off of DeRozan. The Caruso one, like if Giddey turns out to ball for them, maybe we won't remember it too much. But not getting a pick from the team that has every pick in the world was pretty bad for a guy that literally held down your entire defense last year. Like that was a pretty bad move. So they got to get a bit smarter with some of the moves that they're making. But they look like they've got a really they look like they could potentially have a bit of a steal of a draft pick from this year. And there is still young talent there, but yeah, who knows what's going to happen with the Bulls? It's a weird one.
I think it's similar to the Nets position where they still have a little bit too much to be the worst team, which I don't think they're not trying to tank, and this team has never tried to tank. They've never successfully tanked. I'm even just thinking back to Nikola Mirotic, the Zion year, or the random guys we would pull from the G League that would just come play for us that tanking year, the one tanking year we had, and would just win us games left and right. But that was the Doncic year, actually. It was the Doncic year that we were supposed to tank, and we ruined the tie between us and the Kings. The Kings still fumbled the pick anyway. They still fumbled. Took Bagley instead of Doncic. But that was the last time we really tanked, and we haven't had the opportunity to. And now that we do, we still have Levine, we still have Vooch, and those are, I think I wouldn't say the same for Levine. I think it depends on how he comes in and plays. But I think there's enough here to still put together a 30-win season, which I don't love.
Yeah,
and I hope that's not the case. And I think we can still keep Vooch and get off Levine and let Matas play. Let get him as many minutes as he can. Let Pat fully prove to us that he cannot be a secondary playmaker, shot maker on this team. I have the tiniest little ounce of hope that maybe that's still in him, but I don't think it's there. But why don't we see it? Why don't we try to get there? But I think ultimately Lonzo's going to come back. Vooch is going to be there. Levine's going to be there. And I think
Yeah,
the
Lonzo, remember
second you
him?
sniff 35, 40 wins, this team's not going to trade Levine. Unless there's a crazy deal. And I don't think a crazy deal will come. I think that the best that you'll get is not having to attach picks, maybe getting second rounders in return, and they just have to be okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, if they really want to get off him, I mean, their hope just has to be he comes back, he's healthy, and he balls out, because Zach LaVine is a guy who's capable of averaging 25, 26, 27 points per game. Like, you got to hope that he can come in and do that, and his trade value takes a bit of an uptick, and teams are desperate around getting closer to the trade deadline, and then maybe it works out like that. That's got to be the hope for Chicago. But yeah, his draft stock at the moment is definitely kind of at an all-time low, and the Bulls unfortunately are just in a bit of a weird situation for what feels like the third straight year. But moving up, the Atlanta Hawks, 35.5. They won 36 games last year. Trae Young missed 23 games between February and April. That was obviously a blow. They've gotten rid of DeJounte. And I've been hearing a lot this summer. It's like Trae Young's getting super disrespected. Trae Young is this, Trae Young is that. Okay, Trae, you got your team back. Come and show us. Come and show us that you can be the leader of the pack. This is still a roster that doesn't totally make sense. But if Trae Young can lead this team to somewhere in the 35 to 40 win range, then I'll believe again in Trae Young being a leader of a team. Because at the moment, I feel like he's a very good player who's going to put up great stats, but leading a team to being a winning team, that's still kind of up in the air with him.
It is. And the roster as a whole too is not, it's not wowing you. I think that they really need to figure out what they're going to do with their long-term future here. And it's tough because you have a player like Trae who is talented, who people get behind. The city of Atlanta loves to fill up those seats to watch Trae Young play. I mean, that is still his team. And you can find hope in Jalen Johnson, a guy who's one of the fastest favorite players for me to watch if I'm watching Atlanta Hawks. I mean, this guy really can do it all. And I don't know what his ceiling is like, but for him to make the jump he made last year, great to see that. Rissiker, we're still not sure how we feel about him. I think he definitely fulfills the 3-and-D role. Like, that absolutely was clear by what you see on the tape, what you saw in Summer League, but anything beyond that, not really. So where you don't have, you're not really buying that anyone on this roster is going to take a massive enough jump to help Trae take this any further than he already has. And I know clearing DeJounte Murray off the roster had to be done just in terms of the fit, quote unquote fit, but you got worse. You absolutely got worse. You just traded essentially the minutes that you had DeJounte Murray playing, a guy who can run any NBA offense in the league and do it well. A guy who's going to defend any other opposing guard or wing and do it well. Like, you got Dyson Daniels. I love Dyson Daniels. But he is not close to the quality of player. You got objectively a lot worse. And a rookie is supposed to change that a lot? I don't think so. I don't think so. And the front court, that's an interesting thing for me. Like, they got three guys, Capella, Okongwu, Nance. Okongwu's not really had his shot.
Did he finally start this year? That's a big question.
Seriously,
Is he finally going to start this year?
what is going on here? And I think they really need to figure that out, because I mean, Larry Nance is also a guy who could get a lot of minutes. And I think in terms of what he's going to bring for Quinn Snyder, a much better playmaker, faster decision maker, can play out the elbows, do a lot of handoff stuff that Snyder wanted to get into. He could be more, adept at that type of system than Okongwu. So what do they do there in the front court? So there's still questions as to who stays on this roster and what they do. And they are arguably in a worse basketball hell situation than the Bulls right now too, given the fact that they still owing picks to the Spurs, that's already paid off. The Spurs are quietly amassing some really good assets for the future, and they already have their guy.
Yeah, the Spurs are quietly putting together an absolute masterclass over the last 2 years. It's definitely they're definitely in position to make great moves and just build this team that you don't need to say super team. Wemby alone, him fulfilling his potential plus all the rest. But we'll get into the Spurs later. But yeah, the Hawks, there's still so much to figure out. It's really tough to make a call on what they're gonna do. But I'm excited to see Trey get the team back and see what he does with them this year. But like you mentioned, Larry Nance, I think he's definitely a guy that could become a favorite of Quinn Snyder very quickly. Let me take a big jump. Go from the Hawks with 35.5 wins to the Heat with 44.5. They won 46 games last year. There was a lot of injuries, but I know it's still the Heat, and I'm not gonna make a prediction that they're really gonna fall off, but it kind of feels like they're being left behind a little bit in the Eastern Conference. That's like this the feeling that we get over the last couple of years. Like last year, they were gonna make this trade for Dame, didn't happen. This year, they were gonna make the trade for Donovan Mitchell, then he extends in Cleveland. Other teams are getting better. They're kind of just staying the same. Jimmy Butler, is he going to actually play during the regular season this year? I mean, they're in a bit of a limbo, but at the same time, they've still got a pretty solid roster. And as long as they have Eric Spoelstra, I'm going to back them to be successful in the regular season.
The middle of the Eastern Conference right now is so like bleh. Like the Bulls, bleh. The Hawks are bleh. And the Heat are fine. They just lost Caleb Martin. I think I mean, huge is not the word, I guess. Like they always find ways to work things around it, but he was so important for them. He's very often taking the opposing best wing player. That's on him. And you're replacing those minutes with a lot of Josh Richardson, Jaime Jaquez, and that's fine. I like Jaquez's defense, but I think Caleb Martin definitely brought a lot there. So they did objectively get worse. Alec Burks, I mean, not the defender, but the shot maker, sure. I'll buy that. What are they banking on? Jovic, I'm excited. Maybe give him more time and he could really show some things. So maybe they're okay with letting him walk, giving Jovic more minutes. Jaquez could continue to improve. I believe that. They're really big on Haywood Highsmith. They really believe that he's like once he gets his shot there, like he is one of the longer wing defenders in this league. And he's just coming into his own. That's another guy that next year, if he's shown up in a playoff series, then you're not surprised. I mean, they still got guys on this roster. Kel'el Ware, I really like what we saw from him in summer league, and if he continues to buy into Heat culture and he really buys into training and that effort and everything that comes with wearing a Heat jersey, I think he's got a really Miles Turner high ceiling. Playing that next to Bam, 2 rim protectors, like they could do a lot there. So there's still some toys to play with here for the Miami Heat. I still think they're going to still be around the same level. They'll still be a team that you don't want to play. If Jimmy Butler is in a Miami Heat jersey and they're continuing to develop these guys, Terry Rozier gets more time to get accustomed to this team. Don't forget, he was actually one of the best shot makers, pick and roll playmakers in the league when he was with the Hornets, albeit on a little bit lower volume. But I mean, he's another guy who's going to contribute a lot. So I don't know. I'm still buying that they're there on the cusp for the 7th, 8th seed. If things continue to break right for them, if their players continue to play how we've seen them play.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be crazy either if they kind of were a bit above that too. Like, because I mean, like especially man, is Bam Adebayo's floor spacing actually real? Is that something we're going to see more of again this year? No. Okay.
I mean,
still,
I'm intrigued. He's taking it. Two shots a game in the last 10 games of the regular season. Now you're seeing him do a little bit here. And
3-3 that game in the Olympics. I mean, there could be some there. Let's see how it goes.
That's also the FIBA line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see let's actually see kind of some extended minutes from like the Rozier, Hero, Butler, Jaquez, Bam lineup. I mean, that was kind of we didn't really see a lot of that last year. Like, is that something that makes sense? And we still need time to figure out if that's actually a good lineup. There's still question marks, especially about that backcourt of Rozier and Hero. There's still definitely question marks there. But yeah, like you said, there's still reason to believe they're still going to be competitive. There's still reason to believe that there's going to be some bright sparks this season. Just hopefully Jimmy's healthy. Like they definitely needed a healthy Jimmy Butler playing with them. Then we got next up the Eastern Conference finalists, the Indiana Pacers, 46.5. Expect the mark from last year, 47 wins. Everyone's coming back, but I'm quietly expecting there to be a slight drop off. But at the same time, if we finally get a full healthy season from Tyrese Halliburton, then I'm all in on the Pacers matching or even exceeding what they did
Yeah.
last year.
Where's the drop off? Where's your Pacers fate?
Halliburton's health. The last 2 years, he's been looking great, and then he's had injuries that have derailed his season. And I know he
Okay,
came
fair.
back, and they still got to the Eastern Conference Finals, but the level he was at to begin the year, and then how long it took him to get back to any sort of level like that, it was a big break. So hopefully we get like a 70 game season from him, if not more. And then you kind of believe that this team is going to keep on ticking over, and what's going to stop them from being the number one offense again in the league next
Yeah.
year.
It obviously everything hinges on him being healthy, like their ceiling. Sure. If we assume health, they're let's work through this. Ben Shepherd, does he get more useful as a role player on this team, given his shooting that actually came up in the playoffs and was like, whoa, okay, that's actually an NBA player. I think I'd bet on that. He showed enough in playoff scenarios, so I believe that. Does Ben Mathurin take another step forward? Maybe not a massive step forward, but a step forward based on what we've seen on him the last couple seasons. I'd say yes. Aaron Nesmith, I'm relying on him to continue this level of play. I don't know how much better he'll get, but I think that at this level, he's an acceptable spot-up shooter and a really, really spunky defender. I like him.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing with Nemhard. Pascal Siakam, give him another season.
Yeah.
With this team together. Like they still have a lot of different things that they can run offensively with him as more of the focal point. We saw Miles Turner playing full season at the 5. That looked really good. And you love their bench too. We haven't even talked about Jarris Walker. Like
we're finally gonna get to see him.
I think so. I think so. And I'm a big believer that he's going to, raise their ceiling if he's somebody that could really slot in and be a contributor. So I think there's still a lot more room for growth, and obviously it does hinge on health, but I can't imagine them getting worse. The shooting definitely needs to come back, and they lost a little bit of their spacing with Hield out there, but maybe that's the point. We kind of see what their offense looked like when their hot shooting went down, when Halliburton wasn't making all these crazy deep threes. Their offense certainly wasn't humming at the same rate, but I still think talent-wise, they'll get back to that same level.
Yeah, I think it's definitely to be expected. There's no obvious reason to think that they're going to drop off. Hopefully, I like that Toppin was brought back. Hopefully, if his shooting and not just like his athleticism and floor running, that's always going to be there. If his shooting kind of sticks to what it was last year as well, that's going to be big for them too. But yeah, the Pacers are. I think as long as Halliburton's healthy, and I think they're going to be they're very likely to be the number one offense again. Let's see if that defense can take that extra bit of a step. Like you say, a guy like Walker coming in, Nembhard and Nesmith kind of continuing to do their thing. I think there's definitely a ways for them to improve. The next duo, then, one you're interested in, the bubbling sort of somewhat rivalry. Started in the playoffs last year. The Cavaliers and the Magic, both at 47.5. What do you think here? Is this a bit disrespectful to the Cavs having them the same as the Magic, or
No,
what's your
not at
thoughts
all.
there?
I think that's respect to the Magic, absolutely. And I love this. I think this is absolutely going to be such a good rivalry between these two teams because their play style, like both are so physical. With the Cavs, with their seems like they're maintaining their giant front court, and just the way that they played, it was such an old school style of play in the playoffs, and I hope we continue to see that. And I think that's why they're at the same level. They both match each other so well, but I think the Magic got a lot better with getting KCP in and keeping Gary Harris, cleaning things up a little bit by letting Markelle Fultz walk, Jalen Suggs has really been proving himself as a shooter. I think he continues to get better there. And Franz Wagner too. He had a terrible, terrible run in the playoffs. He was
Mhm.
not himself. Um, I'm not banking on him becoming a elite shooter, but I'm banking on him playing a lot better than that. Banchero, he's continuing to ascend. Jonathan Isaac is still, I believe, if he's not the best, versatile defender, tell me who is, and maybe that's an argument for another day, but he's there. So the amount of talent that they have and the fact that they've done things so quickly over this past year and the real culture that Mosley's developed there on the defensive end of the ball and then them figuring things out on the other end, getting KCP in, who just fits absolutely perfectly with everything they're doing. If they just have a little bit more functional spacing next year for Franz and Bankera to work with, that is, that's going to open things up so much. If you have Suggs and KCP out there, they're both real floor spacers, and you can run so much of the offense that you get from Franz and Bankero. Dude, this team. Here's the question: are they better than the Cavs? That's hard to answer right now. It is, but
Yeah,
that's a serious question for a team that just re-signed Donovan Mitchell to Supermax, and had questions about health. Is it disrespect? I don't think so. I think the Magic are that good.
yeah. I mean, it's tough. So like, obviously, I've got question marks about both the teams, but the Magic, I still think they're missing that other floor general. I think Banchero has talked about how he doesn't want to be so relied on in terms of the offense and having to kind of be the main creator. I think they're still missing that like legitimate point guard, that little kind of play setter. I think if they can find a way to get that type of player into the team, it might hurt their defense slightly, but I think it would improve them overall. I do think they've improved, obviously, their shooting, which is a big hole in their game. KCP definitely improves that. We see Suggs take that leap. What are we going to see from a guy like Anthony Black this year? There's a few other young pieces that we still kind of have question marks over with the Orlando Magic. They were kind of the surprise package of last year. I don't think anyone's really expect them to do what they did. And then the Cavs played their best basketball when they had Garland and Allen injured, or Garland and Mobley injured. That was kind of when they played their best basketball last year. But obviously, the previous year, they were one of the best teams in the league playing that lineup with the two bigs with Mitchell and Garland.
Mhm.
So, I mean, let's see what Kenny Atkinson does out there. What's he going to change with this team? What are we going to see? Is Mobley finally going to take that offensive leap? Because that really opens up so much doors for this team. Can they figure out that little bit more, the way to kind of continue to thrive while also still playing on the floor together? We kind of see sometimes Garland and Mitchell kind of look like they get in each other's way, but this is still, it's just the Cavs are such an uber talented roster, especially as like a starting five. I still think I'd give them the edge, but I want to see early on from them what they're going to do to kind of make this lineup make sense, because they're committed. They're clearly committed to it. Let's see if they're doing that blindly or if they actually have a plan here.
Yeah, I think what you're gonna say to yourself as a Cavs fan, as a believer in this roster, is that hey, last year, we won 48 games, and that was such a disjointed, injury riddled year. Like Garland couldn't stay on the floor without breaking something on his face at any point in the season. And 48 wins with all that, Mitchell's still all in. We still think that Mobley can get better. Um, I think that their role players just completely laid an egg in the playoffs. That's concerning, but maybe just a one-off. Um, I think that they are going to feel pretty good about running things back. Because what's your other choice? I don't think there's a lot of great deals that make a ton of sense for them. Ironically, I think having Lowry Markkanen on this roster would really complete things real nicely for them. Just more for floor spacing instead of the double big that they run. But man, I think both these teams are so neck to neck, and I'm not really sure. I just believe that there's so many more ways that the Magic can figure things out with their roster, and I think there's so much more unexplored potential for them to be better, even with another like elite floor spacer. Like KCP will change things for them when he's on the floor. Um, and that poses the question of like who will be more dominant during the regular season. I believe in the health too. I think the Magic have proven that they can be more
Yeah,
healthy
they can be more
than the
healthy.
Cavs
Yeah,
can.
that's fair. And I still,
Garland has not put
I
together a healthy season yet.
yeah, I like to think we're going to see a bounce back year from Darius Garland, and I also still think that Donovan Mitchell
Yeah,
is the best player, at least offensively, on
yes,
the between the two rosters. So I think
absolutely.
I still might just give the Cavs the edge, but like I said, I'm going to need to see early on, like that like 10 games into the season, that my opinion might quickly change. But it's definitely going to be a battle, and I think this could be a budding rivalry that wouldn't be surprised if this was like the 4 or 5 matchup again next season in the playoffs. Next up, we got the Milwaukee Bucks, the forgotten team. The Bucks have been completely forgotten about. 50.5 wins projected. They won 49 games last year. Injuries, coaching changes, chemistry issues. It was just a mess of a season for the Milwaukee Bucks. They could so easily still like if this figures out, if this turns into what we thought it was going to be last year, I mean, they could be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Giannis is still capable of being the best player on the floor every night, the best player in this league. I mean, are him and Dame finally going to figure it out? Doc's got that time, a legit offseason to kind of figure things out. Dame and Giannis have that time. Can Middleton be healthy? Gary Trent Jr., I think it's an upgrade on Malik
Yes,
Beasley.
undoubtedly. Yeah,
Hopefully his defense is still there. I think like people want to question his defense, it dropped off, but it's also easy to drop your defensive level when you're playing in a losing team and you're kind of eyeing a move elsewhere. You're thinking, oh, I'm just going to put my effort into offense. That's what's going to get teams to notice it more. Now he's in a winning position that he's going to be demanded to be a good defender, and I think he'll rise to that occasion. Health is obviously going to be big, but this is a team that they could have such a fiery bounce back of a year this year.
hmm. I can see that, and I want to believe in it. Um, is Chris Middleton healthy for the whole season?
Yeah, that's the big thing.
Probably not, but like if he'll be healthier than last season, if unless things go terribly wrong,
I mean, he got
which
his two
is
ankles.
not
Just
not hard.
got surgery on both of his ankles. Apparently, he's going to be good to go by. I think they said training camp. Maybe it was the start of the season, but yeah, I think he's got surgeries again, which is also it's always you don't like to hear it with Chris because he's had so many injury issues. But
Yeah.
hopefully that fixes the issue that he had last year. And like if he can play 60, 65 games, like that's such a big plus for this team.
Yeah, I think the biggest question mark for me for them on this over under is I'm just gonna assume Chris Middleton's healthy. Um, my question mark is Brook. When's gonna the year gonna be when he shows up and things look different? Maybe not. In this day and age, players continue to play later on in their years, but I feel like you got the sense a little bit over this past season that he was slowing down just a
Mm-hmm.
hair. Well, you kind of see it on the floor. Like he wasn't moving the same way that he was before. I mean, he is another year older, and that drop off could be coming. We don't know when it's going to come, but if it does, it's going to have a dramatic effect on this team and how they want to play defensively. Because essentially, like when Doc showed up, he was like, "What you guys were doing before worked. Let's kind of get back to that." A lot of the themes of what they're running was things that they ran under Bud, and if Brook is not holding up the way that he needs to, that's huge because who else is on this roster? They don't have a big. Is it Bobby Porter's? Is it Giannis? Is
It's
Giannis going
Bobby
to play
Portis,
more of the
yeah.
five? Which he could. But that's I think the most volatile part of this team is how things work around Lopez. Chris, I think he's the cherry on top. If Chris Middleton is humming, and I believe the Dame and Giannis thing will work itself out. I just can't imagine a world in which those two level talent players who wanted to play together and are smart NBA players can't figure it out. I think they will. But Brooke, you can't replace that. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm happy with all the other additions on the margins. I think they did a really, really good job on the margins. They had basically nothing to work with, no assets. They're over the apron, and they switch out Malik Beasley, and now they have Prince and Gary Trent Jr. on the perimeter. That's a defensive upgrade. And I think shooting wise, you stay pretty good. DeLon Wright as your backup point guard, I like that actually. I think he's going to bring a lot, in terms of playmaking, defense. The minutes that he's going to provide, nothing crazy, but it's going to be an upgrade over what you had. I think he's going to bring like defensive enough defensive effort to make up for Dame, especially if they're sharing the floor together.
Yeah, for sure. And like you were saying, like I always say, like the best players figure out a way to play together, and I expect that from Dame. I know people are kind of ready to call time on Dame and say he's on the decline now. He can still be an excellent NBA player, and I'm playing like alongside a guy like Giannis. I think they can absolutely dominate, especially in the regular season. So, yeah, I mean, Rook is kind of the interesting one. I think I saw a report there yesterday. I think where they're ruling out trading him, and though that was a conversation that was being had. Maybe this is the last year we see a Brook Lopez in the NBA, or maybe just with the Bucks. So, like you said, it did appear that he was slowing down that little bit, but he's going to be a big part of everything that they do, because he is that sole big man. If it's not him, it's going to be Giannis, and I don't think that's something that they're overly excited to have to play Giannis heavy minutes at
Yeah, that's too much
the
on his
five at the
body.
five position. But I expect the Bucks to have a bounce back year, and I'll be surprised if they're not over 50 wins. That'll probably look at a real decline from Brook and Chris Middleton not being healthy. That
Yeah,
I think that's the only way we'll see that.
I think Giannis kind of guarantees you 50 wins. He's
Yeah,
that kind of player. He's like Jokic level player, where if he's healthy, you're gonna get 50 wins. You're gonna be a top 4 seed. And I think we're kind of starting to lose appreciation for that in a way,
yeah.
for
hmm
Giannis. Like, I hope he has a year where he reminds everybody.
It's the
And
playoffs.
same with
Unfortunately,
Dame.
the last 2 years he's been hurt in the playoffs, and that's always a quick way to wipe people's memories out
Yeah.
of how good a player can be.
Super quick question for Bucks. Just thinking of last year when we were previewing Dame's arrival to Milwaukee, and then we were thinking about the Suns. They got Beal in, Durant, Booker. What team was more surprising to you to fail to meet expectations on the offensive end of the floor? The Giannis Dame duo, or that three-headed dragon there in Phoenix?
I think Giannis Dame duo.
Yeah, I think so too.
That
That
was a
was
more
supposed to be
obvious
so
and a more
unstoppable.
obvious fit. Yeah, like
Yeah,
it was more obviously like, how could this fail? It was that like that. There was definitely that sort of feeling with them.
yeah. That I think looking back on it, we saw enough to be like, it's good. It's not insanely good. It's not like um finals chances changing good, which was the whole point. And that's a pretty dramatic drop off from what our expectations were. So I think who has the most pressure right now for them to make a bounce back season? I feel like the answer is Dame.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely agree on that. Let's go to a team I know you're excited to talk about. The Philadelphia 76ers,
Yeah.
52.5 wins projected. They won 47 last year. I mean, look at it this way: if Embiid played 10 more games, I think you can give them 6 more wins. So even like their roster last year, if Embiid had been in a small bit more healthy, they probably exceed that win total. And now with their new look roster, I think they're gonna smash this.
Dude, this is a Daryl Morey masterclass. Always star hunting. What does he do? He gets a star. That's what they had to do. They did it. We already talked about it. We won't talk about it ad nauseum, but Paul George is going to give them the floor they need to not only, rest Embiid, but feel pretty good about the off nights and playoff scenarios, which, we've seen kind of happens because he's just so overworked. And to get him on this team at the time that they needed him for Embiid's window, huge. And then the margins that Morey works with and the guys that he surrounds his stars with, we saw it in Houston, how he surrounded Harden with all these, your Trevor Arizas of the world, your Alfred Aminus of the world. Those guys are maybe forgotten to some, but if you're a Rockets fan, if you watch those series with, Chris Paul, Harden, even before Chris Paul, dude, those guys were essential. Harden would not have been able to do what they did without Houston's defense being what they were, without the floor spacers being who they were. And they got in some solid guys. They kept Kelly Oubre, first of all, who, has had a kind of a turnaround season last year, is quickly changing everyone's view on him. Now he's a two-way player. We always were like, Kelly Oubre looks like a guy who could be an insanely good two-way player, and last year he did it. and you brought in Caleb Martin alongside him
Mhm.
for a massive discount too. Like Caleb Martin,
Yeah,
I think he took almost half the money
yeah.
that he would have
His
gotten for
his
Embiid.
agent fumbled the bag there,
I
but
have no biggest bag fumble of the season, but I mean, happy to see him get away from the Heat. It's going to be even more stressful for Boston fans to now not only face the Heat at some point in the playoffs, maybe, but then face the ghost of Caleb Martin on the 76ers. They won't be afraid of him. That will be actually the funniest dynamic of that series if they play each other is that they won't be afraid of Embiid, but in the back of their minds they'll be afraid of Caleb Martin. It'll be there. But Caleb Martin, now you got Kelly Oubre. So if Paul George needs to sit, okay, you got those two guys. Oh, and then you got Eric Gordon, who can actually play a tertiary role instead of him showing up in Phoenix and being like, hey, you need to play 30 minutes a game. He's like, what? No, like he can actually sit back and play realistic minutes. And you look behind him, you got KJ Martin, who I still think he still has some juice. I think he still has untapped potential to be a very good rotation wing, and you now got four guys alongside Paul George who are going to fill out that wing rotation, which has been kind of the main issue for the 76ers for the past couple of years is like, where is their wing help? Who's actually spacing the floor? These guys who are athletic enough to cover ground, especially with Maxey, if Maxey's getting a little bit outmatched physically. And the answer is yes. Like they have the roster around them necessary. And oh yeah, you got Andre Drummond, who's maybe the best offensive rebounder in the league still. I think
yeah,
so.
I think
I'm pretty confident in that.
I think last year he established himself, I think, as one of the top, probably the top backup big there is in the NBA. I think you can absolutely make that argument, and I think that was a great pickup from Philly.
If he played like 28 minutes a night, he would probably average like 14 boards still. Like I feel pretty good about that. And the fact that you can rest Embiid, play Andre Drummond, and have like a fun like 20 rebound night from him once he finally gets to really stretch his legs, that's great. So overall, what they were able to do. Oh, and not even to mention keeping Kyle Lowry, Reggie Jackson, two guys who perfectly match Maxey, who can play with him, who can fill in there. They, I think, have completed their roster in a way that they haven't been able to achieve in the past few years. And to do it while signing the star, that's not easy. This was absolutely a masterclass. And I think we were unsure who won the offseason last time we recorded. And after these like little moves on the margins, like absolutely 76ers, the way they switch things up, they definitely won this offseason for sure.
Yeah, no, it was the way they filled out the roster has been really, really impressive. But like it started with, I think it actually started with Andre Drummond, I'm gonna say, and then quickly came Paul George, and the way they've kind of made the moves from there, like Caleb Martin, that was a huge pickup. Obviously, re-signing Kelly Oubre, and like obviously getting they're always probably gonna bring Lowry back. Then they get Reggie Jackson. They also drafted Jared McCain. Like, what are we going to get to see from him this year? Maybe not too
Yeah.
much within this roster, but he's still a really exciting prospect that they've got along with all the talent that they already have, and that's really cool. Like the way I'm looking at them now, I'm kind of just like, are they willing to like give Embiid kind of the 2019 Kawhi Leonard treatment? To
They
find
should.
a way to make him
They should.
healthy for the playoffs. I mean, that's the call. Like, you be healthy for the playoffs. Screw the MVP. Screw being eligible for All NBA. Yeah, we'd love you to play 65 games, but we'd rather play you in 58 or 59 and have you at full tilt going into the playoffs. Like that's it. That's it. That's why Embiid, you want to be less hated. He was on the podcast talking about how he's the most hated guy in the NBA. Show up in the playoffs, be healthy in the playoffs. Just please, please, because I always love you, but I want to see you be healthy in the playoffs. Like that's what we need to see from you. And that's got to be the 76ers goal. I think that's what it was when they went and made sure they got PG. Now it's literally just about resting Embiid as much as they possibly can and making sure he's at full tilt in the playoffs. Because you get a healthy Embiid in the playoffs with Paul George, with Maxey, like that's an unbelievable team.
Yeah, I feel very differently. Obviously, after the moves they made about the 76ers compared to probably the last 3 years, ever since they had Jimmy. I haven't felt like they could truly compete with Boston until now. I think they actually do have a roster that can compete with Boston. They have the wings to, keep up with them defensively. Now, it's a question of how much Maxey can elevate his game. If he really can continue taking steps forward, um, that's a game changer as well. Like he, I think, has another level in him where if it's not Embiid going full tilt all year long and you can kind of rely on Maxey to be, a solo act from time to time, that's a big difference maker. So you got Maxey, you got George, you got guys who can continue to run this team if Embiid's not there. So if they can keep him healthy, I don't think we have not seen a healthy Joel Embiid in any playoff series over the past 5 years. So that's a
Now, like,
completely different
since he's
player.
really broken into being a top
Yeah.
5 player in the NBA, we haven't seen it.
So the guy that the Celtics have bowled over with ease is not the regular season Joel Embiid. Is not the healthy Joel Embiid. If he is healthy, if these guys are, continuing to be who they are, I don't see that changing for anyone they've added to this roster. I feel pretty good about them giving the Celtics a run for their money and really competing for a championship. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like, come on, Philly, just get by the second round. Like, just get by the second round, and that's already an unbelievable achievement for the 76ers team because it's been so long since they've done that. And then we got another team that I also think could smash their projected wins total. The New York Knicks, 53.5 wins. They won 50 games last year. Now on paper, they've got a pretty legitimate 10-man lineup or 10-man strong roster. We know they're going to play hard during the regular season, as hard as anyone else, because that's just the way Tibbs rolls. That's the way the Knicks are going to roll. Randall, if he's healthy, man, Randall could really excel within this new look roster. If he's healthy, and if more importantly, if Mitchell Robinson stays healthy, then the Knicks, I think you're looking at them. If I knew that Mitchell Robinson was going to play 70 games next year, I would be confident. I would be confident of backing the Knicks to potentially have the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. But we just know that that's not going to happen.
Ronan,
and that's a big hole.
Go buy some scratch tickets. Go.
That's just such a big hole because when he plays, he's so
play the
good.
lottery.
He's so impactful. And it just hurts that he's just not going to be healthy enough, especially now that we don't have Hartenstein as well. Like that's such a big blow. He has to be healthy.
He has to, and he won't be. And that's not a knock on him. That's not being negative. It's just the reality of the player he is. This isn't the second time, the third time. I want to say this is the fourth time we've not been able to see him in a full season.
I mean, we've had 1 year really where I think 1 year of it, and that was it.
He is such an X factor, and if that magically happens, if he is magically healthy, then yeah, like that's such a game changer. I think that regardless of his health, though, they could easily hit the over. And specifically about Hartenstein and Randall, a lot of the good, fun things you saw from Hartenstein on the offensive end of the floor was him in the short roll. And we know that Randall has really taken steps forward as a playmaker. And I think has shown a lot more willingness to really move the ball a lot faster. So in the short roll, like Randall could be an elite playmaker in that situation. If he accepts, being a screener and playing off of that, playing off the switches, then he can play off mismatches. Then he can really start moving the ball to the perimeter. You got 2-3 elite shooters at any point in time around him. That would be a situation in which this could be, an unbeatable offense at times. He could bring that because we saw a lot of really nice things with Hartenstein style playmaking in the short roll. You put Randall in that situation where he's obviously a lot more gifted as a scorer, as a creating in the post, what he can do there. Like, I think that they have a lot of potential to continue growing with him, and this isn't necessarily a situation where Randall's the odd man out and he doesn't work out. I think that's still a possibility, but I think that if he buys in, there is a role for him that actually makes sense.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting now as well that he becomes extension eligible in August does he follow the Jalen Brunson mantra there and take a team friendly deal? That's going to be very interesting. I'd be interested to see him if he's willing to take that deal and stick around and we figure it out around him, because I mean, he kind of got forgotten because we went on the run with Brunson and we went in that run in the playoffs without him. He's kind of been forgotten about, but he was averaging 24, 10, and 6 last year. Like he's a really, really talented player, and I think he could definitely thrive within the new look roster with the wings, and even playing some small ball 5 minutes. I think we're going to see that this year, especially if they don't bring back Precious Achiuwa, or they don't make a trade for another big, which I do think they need to do. And hopefully, I think the Knicks still have a move up their sleeve, and I think that's going to be to find a legitimate big man from one of the teams around the league. But it's I'm just super excited to see a healthy season this Knicks. Like, I've never been so excited going into a new season to watch New York Knicks basketball. Like, this is a good feeling. This is a good time to be a New York Knicks fan. Hopefully, let's just see them be healthy. That's the big thing. Let's just see these guys be healthy.
I think that the question with Randall and what we'll see addressed in August is, yes, he can be a productive player, like everything I said, and that can come to fruition. But do you sacrifice your flexibility? Is he the last piece? Because even if he takes a massive pay cut to be extended, like you're going to be over the apron, you're over the second apron, and you're going to be like really, really limited as to what you can do. Is keeping Randall on this team and sacrificing the flexibility to make other moves, is he the final piece? Is he the piece that really puts you over the edge and you need to keep him? Yes, he's a really good player. Yes, he can add those things in the offensive end, but is he the piece that you really need? Or is there a move to be made? I don't know if that's even, if there's a move that makes sense out there where you can move him for maybe a 5 and assets. Is that something that exists out there? And I think the Knicks would probably prefer to stay flexible and maybe find a lesser player that makes more sense on their roster. But if he does end up staying for a deal, then that's it. Like, that's the roster as it is.
Yeah. I mean, I can see both sides of it. I wouldn't rule out either outcome there. I think the Knicks are going to be smart about this. I think if there's a deal to be had, I think they'll make it. They'll be smart. They're not going to lose him for nothing. They're going to make sure that doesn't happen. I think if a deal comes about where they can find another big, or they can just find a way to get rid of him for some assets and a cheaper but solid player, with the roster that they have now, I think they can cover for it that little bit more. But it's also like you're kind of like, we still have that untapped kind of offense potential of an OG, of a Mikal Bridges, but I don't think they've got that same level that Randall has, and that's something we really missed in the playoffs last year. Yeah. So I think for the most part, I'd probably lean towards them locking in and extending him. But if there is that deal to be had where we can get a legit big man for Julius Randle and maybe another couple of assets, I think if it's the right guy, I think I could definitely live with that too.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. The cap heads and all the salary cap nerds will lose their minds if they sign him and basically, that's it, make the roster what it is. But I see the benefit, and I see also, the story. I think he was him and Tibbs are the foundation for the movement that they've got. They wouldn't have had the proof of concept to get in a guy like Brunson, to get the free agents that they got to build what they had. Randall's a part of that, and to see him finish it would be great. So I hope that they extend him. I hope that things end up proving well, because I love this team that they put together, and it's a team that everyone wants to root for. So for Randall to be a part of that and to finish what he started there, that would be the right ending to this story, not the let's preserve cap flexibility to get other guys. Let it be Randall. Let them figure it out.
You can only preserve for so long. Eventually, you just have to go for it. And they also extended Tibbs, which is also that was definitely a good thing to see. Final one in the East, Boston Celtics.
They're good, I guess.
They're okay. I think they're somewhat all right. 58.5.
Few games worse, but I think everyone's getting better. It's fair.
They won 64 games last year. there's a good chance we don't see Porzingis until the new year. So I think you could see them being somewhere either side of that mark without being too far above or too far below. One thing that gives me so much belief in them going and doing it back to back, not just because they're bringing everyone back, but also the extra motivation I think we're going to see from Jaylen Brown after being snubbed by the Olympic team, the extra motivation we're going to see from Tatum after not winning Finals MVP. I think those are small little things that could have a big impact on the Celtics doing it all again.
Maybe, or it's finally the motivation they need to prove it, to leave and do their own thing.
Maybe, man, maybe.
Who's gonna post that? Who's gonna be the first to post that? The second they lose 3 games in a row, or they start asking those questions again.
Did they even do that last year? They did it like twice all year where they lost the last 3 games in a row. So like that.
They were
Guys
so
with the
good last
2
year. I
biggest
think
contract in the
maybe
NBA.
that would actually be a great. That's worth looking into. The number of articles produced on questioning the 2Js together, how many of them were out last year compared to the year before, compared to the year before that. That'd be interesting to look at, because there's no noise. You didn't need to talk about the Celtics last year. That's how good they were.
Yeah, like one question I would ask is like, how many assets would a team have to give up to add either Brown's or Tatum's contract? Because they got the 2 biggest contracts in
Oh
the
yeah.
NBA. I'd love to know what a trade deal would
You'd
look like
actually
that
be
to add them.
trading a third of your team. You'd be literally trading a third of your team in terms of assets. That's
Oh
what it
man,
is.
it'd be absolutely insane. But yeah, I think like it's weird. It doesn't happen too often. I don't know if it's ever happened in the when's the last time it might have happened in the East, but I mean you could make the argument for like 5 teams, maybe even 6 teams that you could legitimately be confident in winning 50 games next year. If you look at the Celtics, the Knicks, the Sixers, the Bucks, you could look at the Cavs, the Magic, even the Pacers. Like you could have confidence of any of those teams going and winning 50 games. It's going to be interesting to see how these teams fare when they're playing against each other. That's going to be important for ultimate position in the East.
Oh yeah, I mean the East. So when we started like bottom to top, I think that was the right thing to do because it maintained interest. But in reality, there are just so many more teams that are just layups throughout the regular season for these Eastern Conference teams. Like we're intrigued by the Pistons, we're intrigued by the Hornets, we're intrigued by the Raptors. I think they are going to try to be good next year, but they're not winning games against the top 6 teams. Like the top 16, the level that we have come to know from 76ers, Cavs, Bucks, Knicks, Celtics, they're not going to be losing games to those teams. I don't think. And then you look to the West, and I think we'll probably get to the West in a different section here, but it's so different. Like the competition at the bottom, like I'm not really sure. Once we end up breaking this down, like there's 5 teams really on the outskirts, and then you look at the Grizzlies, who they're not going to be a play-in team. I don't believe that over under. I don't want to get into it just yet, but like teams like that, the Spurs could get so much better. The Rockets, I think, are going to get so much better, and then you still don't know where the Pels, Kings, and Warriors are going to be at next season. Just not close.
The West is crazy. I mean, you can basically just say like there's 2 teams that are on the outskirts. There's the Blazers and the Jazz, and outside of that, like every team wants to be in the playoffs. I think like so that's the East. It's going to be an interesting series. I know we talked about it last year, but the East has got better again. I think it's very top heavy compared to the West. I think the East are kind of like 6 strong, and then you can be like the West is kind of like 10 strong, like that sort of way. But we'll get into the West at another time. Well, that wraps up the East. Interesting to look at some of these teams. Interesting to kind of initially think about next year after the moves that have been made. But East is pretty stacked, especially at the top. It's going to be real interesting to see the battle for seeding in the Eastern Conference next year.
Yeah, I think interesting to compare the top of the East with the top of the West. There's definitely some parity there, and then once we get into the West next episode, I think we'll see the bottom just doesn't even compare, which is ironic given the fact that we walked through our our bottom teams in the East and think maybe they'll try and compete. They should try and compete, but I mean, there's no competition. Once we compare the two, like the bottom of the East, even if they try their best, they're still going to be tanking. Whether they like it or not, because the West is just so stacked.
Yeah, for sure. The West is just always the West just has that stranglehold on the dominance. But we'll get into that next episode. That's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for sticking with us, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember, we are everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA, and most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.